I'm Juan Rivera. I'm one of Elias's uncles. So me and Jackie are related through marriage, but she's more like a little sister to me. So when I first heard about Elias and Jackie's situation or diagnosis, it was a heavy burden. Me and my wife have our own children that are very close in age. It just shows you that something like this can happen to anybody, and you don't know how you would react if it was your own child.
Introduce you.
Oh yeah. Kind of important, huh?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna stop this real quick and start a new one.
Wait, I want to use this too. This comes anyway.
So how do we know that it's? Can you flip it to see if?
That's a thing.
Or no, we can't. Or look outside.
I'm just trying to put it with the camera, same thing. I just know this is more clear and stuff. I don't know.
All right, is it recording?
Yeah. It's
Oh. Hey.
Hey.
So introduce yourself. Tell us your name and your relationship to Elias.
My name is David Gomez. I'm the father of Elias Gomez. Proud father of Elias Gomez.
You're his papa.
I am his papa. That's what he called me all the time, you know.
Papa.
Good child. So yes, I've been in this for a long time, you know. Like, you know, it's my child, so I'm here. Went through it all.
Yeah.
Elias is you know, he's definitely a good kid, man. He's thoughtful, you know, all the things that you've heard already, you know, I was definitely front and center for. I enjoyed spending time with him. He was he's definitely you know, a good kid, a unique kid, you know. I mean, just one particular moment that I love and I liked, you know, is that this is obviously in the later times when he was in the hospital, but when I would walk in that door to see Elias after work, you know, or even if I wasn't working, whatever the case may be, just to walk in that door took a lot for me to get my feet going through the door. But once I was there, my thing with Elias was doctors could be around, they could be right next to him. They don't matter. It isn't anything going on. It's just me and you talking, dude. You know, and I loved them to the point where we just nothing mattered, you know. The doctors could be asking me a question, just, you know, deal with it. Okay, whatever, done. Now my thing with Elias going into the hospital, we had a connection, just, you know, father-son connection, to the point where we just chill and everything would go out the window. The whole doctors coming up to him asking him questions and stuff like that, just me and him would just chill, you know, to the point where we'd watch videos, we'd be busting up. Those moments, like just talking, you know, there's times where, you know, he'd be off his meds, poor guy, you know, he's off his meds, and some of the meds make you a little loopy, you know, to the point where I think it was more THC based. That conversation alone went something like, you know, Elias, if you could have any car in the world, what kind of car would you have? And before I finished the word have, he said, a Honda Civic, beat up, it got crashed in the back. That's the only car I want. I started busting up. You know, you expect a child to say any car in the world. He wants, you know, like a high-end car, Bugatti, Ferrari or something, you know? But no, my son wants a beat-up Honda Civic. It's crashed up in the back. So yeah, that's the type of stuff that we had, just little laughs like that.
Oh my gosh, the boy.
Yeah, man, he just random stuff, but for the most part, I enjoy those. I take all those good moments and I hold on to them.
So the very
first day that we received the treatment plan, it was a lot of information. It was so much to take in, and they wanted to start treatment right away. And so I don't think neither one of us was ready to hear what the treatment plan was or what it entailed. I don't think we were ready. When I started reading through all the chemotherapies and all the drugs and what the risks were and long-term and short-term risks, it was really scary. Elias didn't read all those details, and he didn't ask for those details either. He just kind of rolled with it and was ready. He wasn't scared. From the beginning, he said, God is with me.
I was in Elias's room, and he was just coming out the shower, and I remember seeing tears on his face, and I remember like asking him like what's wrong, but at first he didn't want to, I guess, say it at first, but then eventually he did come around to say it. And I remember him telling me he was like saying that he felt God's presence with him, and he was just like, he was just saying that he felt God's presence with him at the moment, like when he was like in the bathroom, like I think he was just like taking a moment for himself in there. So, and I just felt like that memory was like important because like it had like importance because it showed like how much like he valued his relationship with God. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was like a memory that really stuck with me. So, yeah.
Elias was the first one to say, I thank God for putting me through this, and I know that it wasn't God that gave me cancer. I know that this isn't of God, but he's getting me through. Like he would say that all the time. So this not only is this helping me to breathe, to go back and see what I posted and see what I went through and relive to tell this story. Not only is it like allowing me to breathe again, but it's helping me to recognize how much God was so present. Because the devil is out to destroy. He doesn't sleep, like you said, and he's going to attack my thoughts, my mind, my everything, and try to, cause my faith to waver. And so reliving this battle, this story, this journey is also reminding me that God was always present. He's always there. He's always there. He got us through our hardest battle. There was so much love in him, and he had this grace about him, and peace, and light. And he definitely was a teacher as well, and he carried his cross just as Jesus did too.
There was I don't know if this is part of the question, but there was a time that he had treatment in Seattle. We went to Seattle Children's, and it was just the two of us. It was a tough trip because he wasn't feeling good. We had surgery prior to the trip, and he had some treatment, and it just made him so sick. So he wasn't at his best during that trip, but he and I went for about 3 or 4 days. And during that time, we had this conversation, and just to change his mindset, because he wasn't he wasn't feeling good. He was falling into depression. And, you know, to change his mindset, I was just like, hey, you know, let's create a story. You know, like he wanted to do design t-shirts. And so then I told him, I was just like, well, let's design it. Let's talk about it. And, you know, I didn't have a computer or anything, so we are just like, let's write it down. You know, let's see what kind of designs you want, what you want on your t-shirts. And so he was just like, I don't know, Mom. He just was not motivated, just not into it. That, you know, again, that was side effects of the chemotherapy. He just was not himself, you know. But so then I started just asking him questions, and I was like, well, do you want to do this? He was just like, yeah, but I don't want to write anything down. I said, okay, it's okay. We don't have to write anything down. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, just ask me questions, Mom. And I said, okay. So the first question I said was, do you want to create a character? He said, yes. And then I said, is your character a boy or a girl? He said, a boy. I said, is it an animal? He said, no, it's a person. And then I said, okay, what is he wearing? He said, he's wearing a black t-shirt, camouflage shorts, and purple shoes. I said, all right. And what is he doing? He said, he's walking. And then I said, all right. And then he goes, and he's wearing a backpack. He's listening to music. And so he just started telling the story. And he said he's walking to light. And every step he takes, he's crushing the devil's lies. He's crushing cancer. He's crushing chemotherapy. He's crushing radiation. He's crushing depression. Every step he takes, he's destroying the devil. And then he said, and in his backpack, he's carrying Jesus and love and the weight of his cross. He's carrying his family. And then he said, he's listening to a song called Breaking Chains. He's just walking. He's free. I said, Elias, who is this? He said, it's me, Mom. I will be victorious. And so back then, I had asked him, like, is that something you made up? He was just like, it's a vision that God's given me. He says, I'm healed. I said, yeah, baby, you are. You're healed. He said, yeah, I'm healed. I'm healed in Jesus' name. And so back then when I heard this vision of his, it was in January of 2018. So that first day of chemotherapy was really hard. It was a tough one. Elias did suffer from when he had a total of 7 chemotherapies that they were trying to infuse, or six chemotherapies that they were trying to infuse in one day in the course of 8 hours. And So they told me that he was going to be tired and that was normal and nausea was normal. I mean, Elias was just, he was very sensitive to even, like his line being flushed. He didn't like the saline. He didn't, when an IV was started, he would feel it and taste it, and he hated it. He would immediately vomit. And it was tough. It was tough those first few chemotherapies. I mean, every chemotherapy was hard. But the very, very first day of chemotherapy, when he received the 5th infusion, 20 seconds into the infusion, he went into seizure. And I ran out. I ran out because I couldn't handle it. I held him and I ran out and I prayed and I screamed and I asked God for strength because I couldn't watch my son go through that. And so I felt his presence and I got up and I said, okay, I'm going to walk back in there and I'm going to make sure he's fine. And so I did. I went back in and he was not feeling good. He was feeling the effects of the seizure. They luckily were still in the room and present. The nurses and the doctor ran in and they gave him some hydration. They actually stopped the chemotherapy. They didn't continue it. They didn't continue giving it to him. And that particular chemotherapy, he had to receive 3 days in a row. And they needed it to change the plan for him because of how he went into seizure. So from that moment forward, he began taking seizure medication and to help subside the treatments or the symptoms, from the chemotherapy. So it wasn't the first time. That wasn't the only time that he went into seizure. He went into seizure a couple of times, and some of them were delayed. He was scared after that, and he actually, the next day, he told them that he didn't want to have that therapy. And they told him that he had better chances by taking the therapy, that the combination of all 6 chemotherapies were going to work better to treat his cancer. And he didn't like that. And so I also stepped in and I said, okay, well, what can we do to avoid this? Is there a way to avoid this, or is he going to go into seizure every time he takes this therapy? And so they started hydrating him prior to that therapy. So now his treatment plan, instead of 8 hours, it went into 12 hours, sometimes 14 hours. So they slowed down the speed of the therapy, and they made some changes. They also were not going to have him do outpatient therapies. They were now going to do inpatient because of how sensitive and he was to the chemotherapy. He had many treatment plans that followed that because they weren't successful. And the treatments that he received after that, they got worse. The symptoms, the side effects of those treatment plans were horrific. Some of them you would see, they would give me the treatment plan, the details of them, and they would have a black box. So those were labeled the black box therapies. And the reason why they were called black box therapy is because it would cause, in some patients, immediate death. And so it was basically a warning. That black box was warning me that the therapy that Elias was going to have could potentially kill him immediately, or it would cause brain damage, or he could be paralyzed, or he could go into a coma. It was just all these different risks, immediate risks. And then, of course, they would say, oh, but that's very rare. We just have to put that warning basically on these therapies just to let you know that it is a risk. But it's very rare. We've never seen it happen. And, just things like that to just give you some type of hope and to remove some fear. But at the end of the day, these therapies are not safe. They were there to do a job, and that was to kill the cancer. But taking on these therapies for a child, a growing child, can be detrimental. It could cause long-term damage as well. And it was hard. It was hard to sign consent. All these therapies, it was very difficult.
I remember starting out, initially the care started out in Tracy, and I don't remember her name, but I can see her face. And this team, I knew from the very get-go, was not going to be able to help Elias. They just could not mentally get a good game plan. And I remember going to these appointments and this doctor making their plan. And, Jackie would say, well, why don't we do this? Or, how is this going to benefit? And they just did not have the answers. I just felt like it was something that they could not grasp fully. And it's very frustrating to be, in a I think they would call them like multi-departmental meetings. And sometimes I would feel like almost their conversations are already scripted. And it's like, not every child is the same. Not every case is the same. And there would be times where Jackie just would not sleep, for days. And I would get that text sometimes and say, well, we're supposed to have this meeting and it was supposed to happen X amount of hours ago and it hasn't happened. And, she would just say, I don't know if I mentally can do it, because she's just exhausted. And that's a horrible feeling to have, to feel like you can't even leave your child for 1 second because you're not confident in the team that's supposed to be helping him. So I remember many, many shouting matches, late at night, because it almost felt like they didn't have the right answers.
I mean, that is a tough situation to be in general. So I see myself like that was hard for me. I couldn't imagine like going through all of that, and how that affects you as a mother, going through all of that mentally, emotionally, physically. And I was experiencing it with her from as her sister and as Eli's aunt, having my own emotions and feeling that and feeling like, oh my gosh, if this is hurting me, I can't imagine how much more she's feeling. And so what can I do to make sure that she's being taken care of? Like, she's taking care of, putting all her time and effort into taking care of Elias, but she needs to be taken care of. And so I really tried my best to make sure, to treat her, to make sure that she's eating, instead of just her focusing on feeding her kids, that she's eating too. And that's it evolved into that, where she kept just putting all of the strength that she had into taking care of Elias, taking care of the kids, and she would eventually put herself aside. I mean, even in day-to-day, people forget about themselves. They let themselves go. And so, but her situation was even elevated, and she didn't give herself that time to rest. She didn't give herself time to eat. She didn't give herself time to take a break from that. There was no break. The cancer didn't go away. So you don't get to take a break from that. And so I was just there to make sure that she did give herself moments where she can re-energize herself. And I would make sure that she would not just re-energize, but bring her spirits up so that she can maintain that strength and positivity, because she needed to continue to be strong for Elias and maintain that positivity around him and her kids and her family. So that's really what I tried to help her with, and try to help her strengthen herself and support her in that way so that she could keep going and continue to take care of my nephew.
You know, we had a huge following, and people would come and visit. You know, some people from the church, from his church, from Elias's church, would come and visit. And this girl, she came and she said God placed it in her heart to wash his feet, to wash Eli's feet. As difficult as it was so beautiful at the same time to witness and feel God's presence. You know, he truly did take a lot of pain away. He definitely loved us, and he held on to us. And he carried us through every step, every day. He carried us. Without him, there was no way I could have gone through each day. Without him, Elias said it himself that he couldn't have gone through it either. Elias believed that cancer was not his enemy. He said that God told him that cancer is not his enemy. That cancer is going to be freedom. And that his journey was going to bring people to the church.
Elias has, since he was young, and maybe because of his upbringing with David and Jackie and David's family that were Christian, and they would, they live that lifestyle and with a faithful life, or had strong faith. Elias grew up in that upbringing, and he also resembled that, and he was always very faithful. And he, even from very little, he would lead prayers for our family dinners, our holiday dinners. Elias would lead us in prayer, and to me, I haven't always, I've been practiced faith, but not to the extent where I feel like I can lead a prayer. And to see him as a young child leading the whole family, believing that the whole family needs to strengthen their faith and pray to God and be thankful for God, it it was just amazing to see like this little boy, like just such a strong believer in God and faith, and so positive. And there, you know, he always remained that, and a more, especially during his journey with cancer, he was even more so just a strong believer in God. He wanted everybody to be a strong believer. He wanted all of us to go to church. He wanted all of us to bring faith back into the family and practice it. And, you know, he was very proud. He showed it, and he wanted everybody to also follow him in that direction. You know, and one thing that he wanted, that he brought us all, not just throughout his journey, but he brought the entire family to church.
Hi, my name is Blanca Lidia Guardado. I'm Jackie's aunt. And so that makes me Elias' great tia.
How was your faith before and after this journey?
Okay. I think I'm going to speak from my heart. This really has impacted me tremendously. It has changed my life in a way that you have no idea. My reaction was to pray for her. And I remember she was so strong. Her faith was so strong that it magnetized me. It magnetized me in such a way that I saw that faith, and I wanted to have that faith. And I know for a fact that in my mind, I said, I want to be right with God so God can hear my prayers. And I remember a day that I decided, I said, I'm going to follow Christ with my whole heart. And so God can hear my prayers about Elias.
I'd like to thank everybody who's been praying for me. It means a lot. Just going into surgery soon. I want you guys to pray for everybody that is praying for me. People that are doing the surgery, pray for them. Pray for my family, my family's family, and go on and so forth. Thank you for everybody that prayed for me. It really means a lot.
Because he was getting symptoms and side effects from the chemotherapy, he had to have inpatient treatment. And so we would be in the hospital for days at a time. He was limited to how many visitors he would have. It was safety, for him, to protect him. And then when we would get home, oh gosh, all the drugs that he had to take was a lot. I had a schedule for everything. We had an alarm. I had an alarm on my phone. He had an alarm on his phone. I believe it was every 4 to 6 hours, he was taking some sort of medication. And, we tried to be as normal as possible, except it just wasn't. It was constantly cleaning the doorknobs, bleaching everything in Clorox, washing his sheets every day. We had to buy more sheets. Thankfully, we had family that helped us because it was costly. We changed his diet, and that also was very costly. The chemotherapy actually caused some side effects that just he hated. So his skin was very sensitive. So we had to buy him a certain type of material to wear. And it was just crazy what we had to do. I tried to keep him active, get him moving. And so we would, go and walk when he had the strength. If he didn't have the strength, it's just, we did whatever he wanted and what he needed. And, you could see that he would push himself and he just couldn't. I would actually tell him, okay, it's time to lay down. You're overexerting yourself. We had to be careful. We had to make sure, make sure that anybody that came to visit was not sick. And, and if they weren't sure, it's like masks, everybody had to wear masks coming into my house. And, just different things. We just had to take precautions. But for the most part, we tried to be normal. If he wanted to go to school, I would talk to the school. I would give them masks. I would give them hand sanitizer. I would give them Clorox wipes. And I would give them all these things. And it's like, okay, call me every 15 minutes. I was a psycho. I was this helicopter mom, like, call me if anything. I was just scared. But Elias was just like, Mom, quit tripping. Stop worrying about it. I'm going to be fine. It's just school. Like, I'm fine. He just was like, he was just so positive.
Hi, my name is Raquel Hare, and I am Jackie's tia, aunt, one of her most beautiful aunties. And Elias, I guess, is my sobrino de segunda parte. I'm not sure how you say it in English. Great nephew, right? Is that how you say it? You know what? My relationship with Jackie and Elias changed in the sense that it brought us closer. It brought us closer in a spiritual sense. Like we started praying together. Jackie would send notifications, things like, hey, I need prayer warriors. I need, prayer right now, very specific and detailed messages. And I felt like that was my way of connecting with her and Elias. So in that way, I guess that brought us closer. Just, despite her difficulties, her complex feelings at the time, it brought a lot of, as awkward as it may sound, a lot of encouragement, because it just seemed like, you know what, she's fighting. She's going through this journey. It's difficult as it is. And I'm joining her by praying with her during this time. And I applaud that. I applauded her resilience and just her determination.
The purpose of the Seattle trip was Seattle Children's was the only, it wasn't the only place, but it was one of the teaching hospitals that offered this immunotherapy. Stanford did not. Elias was put on a wait list, and then he quickly, after being placed on the wait list, he was accepted into the trial. It was a trial. And so we had to go out there 2 times. The first time was so that they could receive his cells, and from there they would supercharge him. So we were, the process is called apheresis. So we went to Seattle the first time. They did apheresis. They removed his cells, or collected his cells, I should say. And they needed a certain amount, which he was able to do in 2 days. So he did apheresis in 2 days. And then from there we came home, and I believe it was maybe 5 weeks after we went the first time that we went back to Seattle, and that was because the cells were ready for him. So he then we went back, and We were only supposed to be there, I believe it was like 3 weeks we were only supposed to be there, but things changed once we got there. So for whatever reason, and I believe this was all God, it was all God, part of God's plan. When we got there, he was supposed to start a chemotherapy. So the process was, they wanted to basically suppress his immune system by doing, they were going to suppress it with a chemotherapy. And then once his immune system was completely suppressed, then they would then infuse the supercharged T cells, his own cells, and then that would then be a matter, I think it was like 60 days after the T cells were infused, we would know whether it worked or not. Or was it 45? I think it was 45 days. 45 days after the T cells were infused, and we would know, we would have an idea whether it worked or not. But when we first got to Seattle, for whatever reason, they didn't start the chemotherapy, and the reason for that was because of insurance. They told us that insurance hadn't approved our trip there, which was odd, because if insurance hadn't approved it, we wouldn't have gone out there to begin with. I mean, the money was spent to send us out there, to get our room and all these things, the plans that it took for us to be out there. I mean, it was extensive, you know? So for us to arrive and then be told, like, because of insurance, we're not able to proceed, just didn't make any sense. So with Elias's home hospital and, you know, the Seattle hospital, they had to make arrangements. In the meantime, we just were sitting there. We were posted, basically. We weren't going anywhere. So he didn't start treatment right away. So we did as much as we could to enjoy Seattle. We were sightseeing, and we were tourists, you know. We tried to enjoy it as much as we can.
When Jackman invited us to Seattle, it was a difficult decision for me and my wife to make to go, because we weren't that close with the girls. We thought about that not only did Jackman need help, but that the girls needed a different environment to be around, even if it was just a couple minutes here throughout the day of what they were going through. So we wanted to be that support for them, for not only Jackie, but for the girls as well.
So finally, the insurance issue was resolved, and Elias was able to start the chemotherapy. And so with the chemotherapy, as always, you know, it made him sick. You know, it caused mood swings. It, you know, made him depressed and things like that. And he didn't like it, but he knew the reason for it, and he understood that it needed to be done. I believe it was 3 days of chemotherapy that he had to endure, and then we had to wait. And so the day before he was supposed to receive T cells, we were called into the office, and we were there already. He was getting like some scans done to see where the cancer is at, to make sure prior to the T cells being infused, he had a PET scan. And so one of the doctors that was on his team called me in to his office, and they told me that they had to stop the trial, and that they didn't want us to leave because they didn't know how long the trial was going to be paused for. The reason why they were stopping the trial is because the night prior to him or that morning, 2 other children had received their T cells, and one went and had brain damage, immediate brain damage within the first 24 hours. And the other child, the organs just shut down. Body went into shock within the first 24 hours and passed away that morning. And so they had to stop the trial because they didn't know if they were able to proceed with the fact that 2 children were immediately and severely affected, one passing. The other child who had the brain damage eventually passed 48 hours later. And so the trial was paused, and then we needed to make a decision. We needed to make a decision on whether we were going to continue with the trial or not. But that if we wanted to continue with the trial, we had to wait until the FDA approved to restart the trial. And I remember when I was speaking to the doctor, the moment that he mentioned that a child had passed and another child had brain damage and was in a coma, I stopped him. I asked him to stop. He was speaking, and I didn't hear no more. And so he kept saying things to me, talking to me about, specifics about the trial and the FDA and things like that. I mean, at that moment when he was speaking to me, I just couldn't hear him. As soon as he told me a child had passed, I just went deaf. And so then I stopped him. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry. I was like, we can continue this conversation. I go, but please, can we just stop right now? Because I'm still stuck on the fact that you told me a child passed this morning within 24 hours of receiving their T cells. And another child is in a coma. I was like, I'm still stuck on the fact that you just told me that. And I can't hear no more. And I said, can we pray for them? Can we pray for these children? And, he couldn't give me their names or anything. He couldn't even tell me if it was a boy or a girl. He couldn't tell me anything. And I said, I don't need to know the specifics. I just need to know, I just want you to pray. Can we pray? And we prayed. That goes against medicine, right? But he was impacted. He said, there was at the time he had to inform 13 other families that were going to receive T cells. And out of the 13 families, I was the first one that stopped and prayed and asked how the parents were doing. I was the only one. And when he went and spoke to Elias did the same thing. He didn't want to hear no more. He told them, no, I don't want to hear anything. Two kids have been impacted. He said, no, I'm praying for them. I don't want to hear no more. I don't want to hear any more that you have to say about this trial. And he prayed for the 2 kids and the families and the parents. And if they had siblings, he prayed for them. And then, but the doctor was, he was persistent, and he said, but I do need to know if you want to continue the trial. And so after Elias prayed for these children, he told the doctor, yes, I want to continue the trial. And I was like, what? I personally was like, nope, we're gone. Let's go to California. We don't need to be here anymore. I was done. My mind was set. And Elias was like, no, we're going to continue the trial. I want to. And I believe that nothing is going to happen to me. I believe that the T cells are not going to kill me. They're not going to kill me. I believe God is going to get me through this, and we're going to continue the trial. And so we ended up staying in Seattle longer than originally planned. And thankfully, every week that we were there, I had a family member there with me that whole week. I had LaRue and Elisa with me. They went to school out in Seattle, so they had a special school for patients and for family members of patients. So LaRue and Elisa, they went to school out there. We at first, when we first got there, we were staying in the hotel, and that was crazy. We moved, I think, hotels 2 or 3 times until we finally got room at the Ronald McDonald House. And at the Ronald McDonald House, we were very blessed. It was very helpful living at the Ronald McDonald House. They had everything that we needed. We were just blessed living there. It was hard. We didn't always have a car because, again, that costed money. So everywhere we went, we had to Uber. For the grocery store, I had to have it delivered. And again, like, my girls have food allergies, so it was very hard. And what was another amazing thing about Ronald McDonald House is that, so the Ronald McDonald House has an Amazon shopping list where people would go in and view their shopping list and buy items to have delivered to the Ronald McDonald House. And so, because my girls had food allergies, they changed their shopping list to include some of the food that my girls could have. Their food is so expensive, and they wanted to help in every way that they could. And so my little girls, they were so happy to be able to go into the pantry and see little goodies for them. It was so wonderful. Just the love and the understanding, the staff that was at the Ronald McDonald House, they were just so amazing.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about was being at the Ronald McDonald House and not only seeing the child with cancer, but seeing the siblings of these children and their parents is another world. It's another point of view that you don't think about, because the little sister reminded me of my daughter Lola. They have the same personality. They're bubbly, and everything to them is funny, and rainbows and unicorns. Even in a situation that they were going through and living through, not only there every day, but before they came to Seattle, they were going through something that you can't even process in your mind that your child would go through.
Going back to the treatment, when Elias said yes, they were, of course, happy to hear, but we had to wait. We had to wait for the FDA to approve for their trial to continue. I don't remember how long that took. When the FDA finally did approve, the day finally came for Elias to receive the T cells, and it was a very stressful day. My sister, Veronica, my brother-in-law, Christina, his godmother, and actually Elias's coach were there. They were present. This football coach, he surprised us. I didn't know he was going to be there, but he surprised us with a visit, and it happened to be on the day that Elias would receive his T cells. It was a very important day because we didn't know what was going to happen. What was going to happen after, those first 24 hours. Even the first 48 hours were very, very critical. And so I was in prayer, and Elias was too, but he was still his silly self. He received his treatment, and he was just like, ugh. But he had a little lollipop to help subside the nasty taste in his mouth from the therapy. And he got through it like a champ. It was amazing. So we ended up staying there. I think we were there for the first 45 days after the T-cell therapy. And then we were able to go home. And so the first 45 days of the T-cell therapy showed that the cancer cells were still there. And so they said that sometimes, it's not until the 60th day that we see some sort of change. The 60th day came and there was no change in the cancer. And so at that point, it was determined that the therapy was not successful. His medical team then moved to try and find other therapies. The T-cell therapy, we were told, was the last option. And his medical team was trying to find other trials. And they found another one in Texas. But by that time, Elias just didn't want to continue doing it anymore. He didn't want to continue any more therapies. He had a moment where and this was the only time that he was just like, no, I've had it. It's not working. It's never going to work. If the cancer hasn't changed this whole time, and I've been going through therapy and after therapy, the chemotherapy has changed him. He was screaming. He was telling his medical team, chemotherapy and radiation and immunotherapies, all the therapies that he has had has changed him, but didn't change the cancer. It made it worse. He mentioned that it mutated and it changed who he was. And that as much as he wanted to believe that he was going to sit there and help other children of the future, he realized that medicine isn't where it's supposed to be after all these years. He said he wanted to help children of the future, but medicine needed to change. Medicine needed to be better. The treatments needed to be better. I remember him telling his doctor, he said, you're killing children with these therapies. It was hard. So, after the 60th day, that was in 2018. He was done. He was done with therapy. But in 2018, he turned 16. And he was living it up. At that time, he couldn't even, you would look at him and you wouldn't even see, you wouldn't think that he had cancer. He had gone through such torture with therapy or anything. You wouldn't have thought that, because he looked so good. He looked so healthy. He was happy. He had this energy. He felt great. He felt great. Seattle was an eye-opener. We met families there that I'm thankful to have met. Some amazing families. The hospital there was great. The staff, they were amazing. It was a little different, dealing with like a trial as opposed to, regular therapy that has already been approved by the FDA. It was a little bit different because we were seeing multiple doctors. We didn't have just like one primary doctor. We had multiple doctors visiting or calling us. It was hard to kind of keep up with. It wasn't what we were used to, but again, it was a trial. So there was a lot of scientists, a lot of doctors, and two people on the medical team in Seattle stand out the most for me. One was the scientist that came and told Elias that he was going to personally take care of his cells. When he told Elias, and he shook Elias's hand, he told Elias that it was an honor to be on his team, and for Elias's bravery to go through the trial and to allow him an opportunity to advance in therapies for children. He shook his hand and he said that he was going to personally take care of his cells. It was just so beautiful. And then there was one doctor. It was the doctor that told me about the two little angels that passed. He personally called Elias the day that he received his T cells. He told Elias that he couldn't be there, but that he had him on his mind, and that he impacted him with just the prayer that he said for those two little angels. He was thankful. He was also thankful for Elias being so brave to take on such a therapy for an advancement in treatment, the future in treatment. Elias was deemed a hero by the Seattle team. They honored him, and along with other children that took on the therapy and the treatment, the trial, they're heroes.